Only put out the type of work that you want to keep doing. If you don't want to be doing explainer videos, stop posting explainer videos online and post the things that you do want to be working on, whether that's personal projects or, in my particular case, doing projects for cheap, not for free.
All right, Bart, dude, thanks so much for hanging out. It's been a while.
Yes, it has.
First off, congratulations, man. Like, I know you're in the midst of it right now. You're planning your 15-year anniversary of Already Been Chewed, man. Congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, 15 years. It's kind of crazy. 15 years ago, I think Nick and I from Grayscale Gorilla spoke for Maxon the first time ever, right around the time I was doing that.
That's right. We got NAB around the corner too. And man, like what Nick's doing now, and like I'm just, I'm not owning a studio or anything, but like I'm at School of Motion. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. But let's kind of go back. Let's get a little nostalgic here. Can you kind of take us back to anyone who might not know the story of Already Been Chewed and how it kind of started? I mean, I know because I feel like I was there with you. I did some freelance for you way back in the day. I don't want to like talk about how long ago that was because I already feel old as it is.
Probably close to the beginning.
Yeah, right. Let's take the way back machine and tell us how like how you started, how you even started our Already Been Chewed and all that kind of stuff. What's your hero's journey here?
Yeah, nice. Well, I mentioned Nick earlier, and that was even before ABC began. He and I spoke at an event in Austin for Maxon, and Maxon has had a big impact on my career and my studio over the years, especially when Paul Babb was there and was leading that community. And so before I ever launched out on my own, he had asked me to speak for Maxon at this event down in Austin, whereas that's where I met Nick for the first time there. Obviously met you through NAB as well, and so many other people that have spoken for Maxon over the years. And so with my journey, I was, working the day job and then working nights and weekends. And just trying to get a little extra cash for my family. No real long-term or business goals in mind. It was just some people are hitting me up for some freelance. I could use some extra money. Why not? And then that turned into, okay, cool. I'm filling my schedule right now with freelance work, my extra time. That's super exciting. But can I fill it with anything that I actually want to do? Or am I just filling it and getting some extra cash? So that was kind of the next step for me, was figuring out, okay, am I loving what I'm doing for freelance, or is it just some extra cash? And then trying to get more selective with the work that I would take on for freelance. And then over time, was getting to a point where I was landing what I consider dream gigs on the nights and the weekends. And that work was getting awards, and it was being featured in magazines, if you remember what those are.
What are those, made out of trees?
Yeah. So Computer Arts Magazine back in the day was probably the most influential design magazine, at least for me, it was. And they had featured my work a variety of times, along with other publications. And in 2009, they awarded me the Digital Artist of the Year. And I was still working, the day job, if you will. And at that moment, it was kind of interesting because it was like, man, this thing happens. It kind of just happens out on the internet. There wasn't an awards ceremony. I didn't show up and get praises. Nobody applauded me. I didn't perform in front of an audience, Yeah. And, but there is that kind of moment of like, all right, this is the biggest magazine in our industry, and they think my work is good, and I should probably take this seriously. I probably shouldn't let this moment just kind of fly by without realizing it. And I think, it's kind of another topic, but as artists, we so often are maybe a little bit shy to shill our work, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always thought that if you're not excited about it, who is going to be excited about it? And so winning that award kind of gave me the confidence of like, okay, someone thinks my work is good,
Yeah.
you know? So I need to be proud of it as well and be posting it more and getting it out there in front of people.
Now, what was that like? Because I want to go back a little bit there, and you mentioned about how you were doing a lot of work for places that you weren't very stoked about, but you're getting that side money, right? And I bet there's a lot of people listening to this. They're like, you know what? I'm still at that point. Like, I feel like I'm taking these side gigs, or maybe it's like they're full time freelance and they're just taking anything they can get. Like, can you talk a little bit more about like how you transitioned from like working on that stuff that you weren't super excited about, but then got to where you were starting to do, clients that you liked, brands that you liked? Because I feel like, was that just you putting yourself out there and going to these events and getting the word out? And of course, like making great work anyways. And, that kind of led to the increase of the more rainbows versus the pain.
Sure.
As far as work goes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nuanced question in the sense that, the easiest answer is only put out the type of work that you want to keep doing. So if you don't want to be doing explainer videos, stop posting explainer videos online, and post the things that you do want to be working on, whether that's personal projects or, in my particular case, it was actually doing projects for cheap, not for free, because I thought I needed to show and prove, which I did. And so early days, I was designing skateboards and t-shirts and doing commercials for my local skate shop, which obviously didn't have the budget that it needed, but it was the outlet and the audience that was going to be super influential in a creative space as far as voice and tastemakers. And so I was designing stuff for my local skate shop, which was building my portfolio. That type of work caught the attention of skateboard brands. So I started freelancing with different sneaker companies within the skateboard industry, larger skateboard companies within the skateboard industry. At one point, I was freelancing with LRG, which is a large clothing company. And so those types of things allowed me to kind of build up a portfolio, build up a tastemaker type of role as far as the brands that I was working with. And I always had the mindset of, I'm going to do this for cheap, but the next guy won't know what I charged for this. And then as I'm doing this for cheap, I'm, from a business standpoint, figuring out, okay, well, when the next person comes and wants this done, how much should it be, based off of time, based off of effort, based off of energy, things like that. And then just kind of slowly built that up. And so I think subcultures are really a great way to get into work and making connections. So if it's not skateboarding for others, there's a lot of people in our industry that their subculture was musicians and doing, they may have started out doing cheaper album covers, which turned into concert visuals, which turned into MTV award show gigs, things like that. And so I am, this is like its own kind of discussion as well, but I am a proponent for doing work for cheap, not for free. I don't like the idea of doing it for free. I think there needs to be skin in the game in order for the person, that wants the work. If it's for free, there's no skin in the game. I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I think you could just, if it's going to benefit you in order to do it for cheaper, it's going to benefit them, then the next person that comes around, you're showing and proving, you're building that portfolio. And so that's kind of the approach that I took.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not getting paid any money, why not just do something that you enjoy? You don't have the pressure or the stress of like having to do it for someone else. So I really like that. Yeah, there's that fine line between cheap and free. and
Yeah.
and trying to build up your portfolio and your demo reel. Like as far as like school of motion goes, like I know a lot of our students, they take some of our classes and sometimes it's the first time they're using After Effects, right? And I know like you have interns occasionally as well. And, you know, it's always that struggle of like, okay, I went through all these classes and did all these assignments and, you know, what do I do now? And I think that's smart because everyone's got their own story. Everyone's got their own interests. And yeah, you got to do like what you did. You got to do what excites you, and what excites someone else or your favorite artist might not be what excites you. So you got to kind of look within and figure that out. And whether it's for a client that pays very little or where you're doing something for free for yourself, like, yeah, like you got to find the passion in it or it's not going to be fun. I know so many people that are just kind of, they just feel at a dead end, and it's, you know, they're doing the thing where you just said, where it's like, they're just putting explainer videos on their demo reel and they're like, why am I not getting hired? And it's like, it's kind of funny how like, well, it's simple. It's because but a lot of people, they're so in their own head. They don't realize that.
Yeah, totally.
And so, you know, you're doing your skateboarding stuff and you're getting to bigger brands. You're like, I remember like when I first met you, you were like in your basement of your house, I think, right?
Yeah.
And there was one other dude that was working with you as a friend, like a producer. So how did you get from there to like, I know you moved into a studio space and all that stuff and like really launched that, like, what was that? Continue on your journey there.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, first step was fill my schedule. Then can I fill it with anything that I'm super interested in? And then doing kind of like the dream gigs on nights and weekends, and got to a point where it just made a lot more financial sense to break out on my own and do it full time, because I was starting to miss out on what I consider dream gigs because of availability. And so I feel like that's an important aspect of this, is like, you know, there's people who are freelance because they're forced to be freelance, whether it's a layoff that happened, can't find a job straight out of school, so you start freelancing, things like that. But then there's, you know, people who jump out too early and there's not a demand for their work. And I think you have to show and prove that there's going to be a demand for your work there in order to take that step. So I was able to hire my first person. They were straight out of college. They needed experience. I needed somebody to send emails for me so that I could be a studio and not a freelancer. And that was always part of my vision. I was on I think ABC has been organic and slow growth over the 15 years, but it was very early on that I knew I didn't want to just remain a solo artist because I felt like I was going to have to constantly reinvent myself and just chase trends in order to stay relevant. But I felt like if I can build a team and make this more of a business model, then I can actually support clients. And when you can support clients, that's going to be more sustainable, you know, because if Nike's hitting me up in 2010, which they were, is Nike going to be hitting me up in 2025 if I'm just a solo artist 15 years later? Probably not. But thankfully, I built a team that allowed us to keep evolving, allowed our work to keep evolving, the portfolio to keep evolving. And so 15 years later, we continue to work with Nike.
So was that one of like the defining moments where it was like, I love working for Nike, but I can't do it alone? I don't know if I was talking with you or who I was talking with, where for a little bit there, they were kind of treating themselves as if they were a full-blown studio, even though it was just you, which is, I feel like is kind of smart to try to like ride both rails kind of thing.
Well, so interestingly enough, I never jumped out and freelanced on a day rate. I never went into a studio and worked on somebody else's machine, which these days that doesn't mean much because so many people can work remote. But in 2010, that was a big deal. And so I had studios wanting to hit me up and wanting me to go in on a day rate. And the whole idea of somebody telling me they're putting me on hold and the hold system was like, what are we doing here? No, like you either have cash or you don't. This person has more cash. I'm taking on this project, you know? Yeah, yeah. And so I never entertained any of that. And, I was, maybe a late bloomer in the sense that I had been in my career for almost 15 years before I went out on my own. So I had done everything from graphic design. I had laid out 300-page catalogs at one point in my career. I had built websites in my career, edit videos, and then, of course, motion graphics and 3D animation. So when I went out, it was never Barton Damer, the solo artist. It was always Already Been Chewed, the brand. And the reason for that was because I viewed myself as capable of doing everything from designing your logo to designing your catalog to putting your 3D animated commercials on broadcast. And you actually helped with some of that back in the day, with some of the catalog work and doing 3D illustrations.
Yeah, no, that was fun. I love doing that. Was like for the boat stuff and Nike. We got like some Chick-fil-A, which I never got my free Chick-fil-A chicken out of that deal, which, watered in the bridge. But
it's full of seed oils, so.
But yeah, I love I feel like if you could run a thread through your entire career, because I know some of the stories that, throughout your career, and even like the stories you've told me when the many times we've hung out in NEB and stuff. Is like, I was just watching, Saturday Night Live, and they had the, what's his face from Alexander Hamilton, the musical, about like, you shot your shot, like you're going to shoot your shot. And I feel like that's you, like you took the initiative to go to that local skate shop and be like, hey, I'm a graphic designer. I see I could help you here, here, and here. I'll cut you a deal. That takes initiative. That takes purpose. And I know there's this one story, and I don't know how, through the 15 years, how big it was, but there was the story that you told about cold emailing a certain someone. And you can tell that, but I'd be interested in, as you look back through the 15 years, was that like a super career defining moment for you and Already Been Chewed? Or if it wasn't that, is there a new pivotal moment?
Yeah. So the story that you're referring to is emailing Rob Dyrdek, which in the year 2025, I'm discovering that nobody knows who that is anymore.
Right. Well, he's still got a show, right?
Yeah, he does.
Ridiculousness.
He does. Well, it's on MTV, and then nobody knows what MTV is anymore either. So
yeah, right. Is that a YouTube show?
I think I realized that after a few groups of high schoolers toured our studio, and I was telling them this exact same story, and they were like, who is that? What's MTV? But so I tried to tell them, okay, in the year 2025, Rob Dyrdek would be the equivalent of Jake Paul. And they're like, oh,
yeah,
gotcha.
TikTok star. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rob Dyrdek was the original Jake Paul. Okay. Let's just summarize that.
Yeah. You're not boxing anyone as far as I know, but
Yeah. So that was a story where Street League Skateboarding had launched a league similar to the NBA. Basically, it was a way for professional skateboarders to be in a league and skate inside of stadiums. And to me, I was really excited about it because action sports athletes are not making nearly the money that a basketball player, a football player makes, things like that. And so I felt like, okay, this is a chance for them to make some real money for all the jumping down handrails that they do and things like that. So I was really excited about it. It was my goal to try to land them as a client. Flew out to their first event, watched it in person, saw that they were using jumbotrons and had screens and things like that. And wasn't sure how I was going to connect with them because I was just a fan in the stands, but knew that one day I wanted to do stuff for them. And so fast forward, maybe, I don't know, several months later, they're on Twitter saying that they are looking for interns. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be an intern. I'm a grown man with a family and a small business I'm trying to get up off the ground. but they're checking emails.
Right.
And so I emailed that account that they tweeted and put together a whole proposal of why street league skateboarding needed to be branded by skateboarders for skateboarders, and that I could tell that they weren't being branded by skaters. And I put a whole kind of like proposal together of like, I'm a professional motion graphics artist. I've been doing work for ESPN and some other brands and Discovery Channel and things like that. And started guessing email addresses. And I was like, I bet you I can figure this out and just email Rob directly. So I guessed a bunch of variations of it, and I get a response back just a few days later. It wasn't very far. And it was like, let's do this. And I was like, oh man, somebody knows that I'm guessing email addresses right now, and it got through to somebody, and they're just like screwing with me right now.
With you, yeah.
Yeah. And then that's it. That's all it said. And I'm like, let's do what? I just proposed like a year's worth of work. And so then a few days later, the general manager of Street League Skateboarding hit me up, and he was like, hey, Rob loves your work. Told me to hit you up and get something going. And so kind of long story short, landed Street League as a client, started working with them. And of course, with Rob's connections, that allowed me to start working on MTV shows, doing branding and motion graphics for a variety of shows that he had going on there. So worked on Fantasy Factory, worked on, Robin Big, worked on a show called Snack Off that he had, Not Exactly News, a bunch of different shows that I was doing a lot of the branding and broadcast packages for through that relationship. That ended up being something where the people that I worked with at Street League Skateboarding ended up going on and working, for instance, with Nixon watches. That ended up leading to us being able to do work for Star Wars IP as well as Marvel IP. So that was definitely a good moment. And I actually had a chance at my 10-year anniversary right before pandemic, literally a month before pandemic. And as you recall, we were planning a big 10-year anniversary party. So that's why we're hyping up the 15-year anniversary party, in case anyone's wondering why we're celebrating 15 years and not 10 or 20. We were all set to have a large 10-year anniversary party, and then pandemic shut things down. But in February, right before things shut down, Rob agreed to do an interview with me, and we talked all about how I reached out to him and how that led to more work. But, one of the things he said, which I think is great advice for anybody that's still tuning in at this point of this conversation, is he said, I saw an opportunity, and it was what I did with that opportunity that turned it into something else. Because there's another saying that's, most people don't recognize opportunity because it's dressed in overalls and looks like hard work. And so I think that, just because I got a chance to work with Street League doesn't mean it would lead to any other opportunities whatsoever. It could have been a one and done, things like that. And I think to your original question, if that was like the most pivotal, I wouldn't say that's the most pivotal, but back when everybody knew who Rob Dyrdek was and everybody knew what MTV was, is probably the most entertaining story to tell. Sure. But I would say definitely being able to work with Nike has opened a lot of doors, because they are the best marketers in the world, and so if they are using you in any capacity, it speaks volumes to your skills and the fact that they want to work with you. And so I definitely was able to take the opportunity of having worked with Nike and turn that into a, hey, New Balance, look at the stuff that I do for Nike. I can do it for you too. Hey, Adidas, hey, Under Armour, and so on and so forth, and kind of take that to other brands. So that definitely kind of puts a cosign and credibility behind the brand, not only as an artist, but as a studio doing work with them.
Yeah, I mean, I see you like, and this is one thing we'll talk about a little bit later, but like the social media presence that you guys have, it's like every single day you guys are just slinging dope work that you guys have done, like Firestone, like beer, Louis Vuitton, like Versace, like all the, like there's some Pokemon, like Louis
Yes,
Vuitton thing. And I'm like,
Tiffany.
what?
Yeah,
Or
Tiffany Co.
Tiffany. And I was like, man,
Yes, it was a Tiffany and Co. that was Pokemon by the artist Dan Arshan.
yeah. And I'm like, man, that's a big Pokemon fan to be shelling out however much money that is to get whatever that diamond.
75 grand for that pendant.
That's a Pikachu fan for sure. Yeah, holy cow.
Hey, I mean, that's half the price of a JPEG back in 2020.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Beeple made a lot of money off of his actually a Pikachu NFT back in the day, yeah.
Right?
Oh, let's forget about all that though. So, all right, so we talk about like some of your big successes. Were there any like big mistakes or like learning moments? Because I'm sure, you know, there might be a lot of people that are listening that are like kind of riding both those rails like you were, where they're like, we're freelancing, but like, man, should I build a studio in this economy? Like, where there's some mistakes and, you know, or any lessons that you'd like to parlay to people listening.
So I did not experience this firsthand, but I tried to avoid it firsthand. And I think it worked out well. But I noticed that a lot of times studios were formed from either two ways. One, there was a group of people that kind of mutiny and broke away from a larger studio, maybe even stole some clients and things like that. And then they started their own studio there. That's not a very inspiring story to me. But then the other way is a lot of times it's a young group of friends that were in art school together. And then there's four of them and they form this studio. What I saw is just from observing other studios and what appeared to be happening to them is now you have four owners, maybe five owners. No one's a decision maker. And long term, that's going to create a lot of this. And so going into it, I feel like a lot of people make the mistake of, well, if the two of us start a company together, or the three of us, or the four of us, I understand the logic behind it. But for me, it was always like, well, if the three of us start this studio, we need 3 times much as work. Right. If I just do this by myself, I need 1/3 the amount of work. And so then as the demand is built and created over time, you can begin to hire people that, you know, can do things that you either don't want to do or that you're not as good at or that you don't have time for. And that's a powerful thing to get into a position where you have the means to be able to hire people. And so I would say be careful to partner up with a group of 3, 4, 5 people if it's your first and main hustle. If you're business savvy, you've got a business that runs by itself, you and some large investors are going to start this other thing and it's going to require 4 board meetings a year for you, partner up. You know. But if it's your main thing, I would say try not to do that. There's going to be a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's probably going to end in some sort of business divorce, and then you're splitting a lot at that point if the business was even semi-successful.
Let's go back to, so how many people work at ABC right now? How many full-timers? 17. So you've like kind of grown throughout the years. Like, is it just like you just kept landing all these projects and it was like, we need to skill up, we need to talent up here, and that just happened organically over time? Because I mean, is that like the biggest you've been is 17 people like currently?
We were up at 23, 22 at one point, but some of that was a handful of interns.
Okay. Now, I feel like, and I don't know if this is still true, but it seems like a lot of people that work for you have been there for quite a long time. And I feel like even having a studio open for 15 years, like I know some of my favorite studios. Like there's one in town called that used to be in town called Legwork here in Denver that, they shuttered a handful of years ago, and it was super sad to see. So it's like, and I know, other stories of different studios throughout the years, especially pandemic and, all the things that happened. So, I wonder how, like, number one, you've been around for so long. But number two, the one thing that like I've known people that have worked for you. I know people that like currently work for you, and they like every single person to a T just absolutely loves working for you. And one of the things that I hear is like, a lot of studios, and why I was always afraid to go to a studio is that I was like not down to do like the working weekends constantly and long hours constantly. And that's one of the things that I hear from people that work at ABC is like somehow you've cracked the code to like actually have everyone have like a decent work-life balance. And number one, and this is one thing we're like burying the lead, like Already Been Chewed is not in LA. It's not in New York. It's not in Chicago. It's not in Sydney. It's in Dallas, Texas. So like just this, that you're killing it where you're at and doing it with like, it seems like you guys have a really tight knit family there too. Everyone enjoys doing it. People aren't getting burned out, and you're not like churning through people. Like, what are you doing different, man? Like, it seems like you kind of cracked the code to, from like a lot of, I know people that work at other studios and they're just like, oh my God, or they're just always churning through people.
Yes. Well, a few things. I think you learn from your mistakes, right? And as the business owner, and then obviously like founding artist, that was not the case for me. Like I couldn't have built ABC without like working extreme hours, but that's because it's my business. I viewed it as my family, and I needed to support for them. And it's also when you're starting out like that, it is such a dopamine rush every time you get a new awesome client hitting you up. Like you don't want to say no to anything because you don't know what tomorrow brings, and so I was juggling and burning the midnight oil while raising a family with my wife and three kids as the sole breadwinner there. But thankfully, I'm not necessarily recommending this, but there's seasons in life where that has to happen, and then there's seasons in life where that shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be snowing in June, and so there's going to be times where it is storming in life and in your career, but it shouldn't be storming year round. So that being said, I knew that was my burden to bear, but that was not the people that were going to work for me or with me. That's not their burden to bear. So my goal has always been, I want to keep things to like a 40 to 45 hour work week at the most. And I will never come to somebody at 5 o'clock and say, hey, here's these revisions. I meant to get them to you. Sorry, I'm just getting them to you now. Can you get them by our 9 o'clock meeting tomorrow morning? Like that's never going to happen. Never going to go to somebody on Friday and be like, hey, we need this by Monday. So we just don't, and we won't do that. And early on, I learned a lesson with a client. I mentioned we were doing catalogs at one point, in addition to all the 3D animation. But we were doing catalogs at one point, and I'll never forget this lesson. I believe it was a Labor Day. The catalogs came back from the printer on Friday before Labor Day. And the client called me Friday night freaking out because the product looked too purple and it was supposed to be blue. And it was just a small adjustment in the printing process that caused it to be like too far one way or the other. I don't remember if it was too blue or too purple, but you get the idea. Well, I was the sucker that picked up my phone on Friday night and took the heat. The printer had an account manager. The account manager was simply able to say to the client, hey, no one's in the printing factory until after the holiday. So on Tuesday, I can look into this for you, and then we can talk on Tuesday. Meanwhile, I'm getting blown up on calls, texts, emails about how this is probably my fault, possibly the printer's fault. The CEO is going to fire us all. And I'm going Saturday, Sunday, receiving and trying to field all of these messages. The printer, on the other hand, nipped it in the bud Friday and said, nothing we can do until Tuesday. We'll talk to you on Tuesday. By the time Tuesday came, the CEO saw the catalog, thought that the print looked great. Nobody said a word, and everyone stopped freaking out. Problem solved itself. And I learned one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned that weekend. And so we operate the same way.
No one's around. Sorry, bro.
I mean, yeah, if we owe you something, of course. Like if we messed up,
if you legit mess something up,
yeah, we delivered a file and there's a spelling error and it's going on broadcast tomorrow. Obviously, we're going to fix that. But we delivered a file and you've got a revision. Cool. Go to broadcast with it tomorrow, and we'll see what can be done over the next couple of weeks for you.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like everyone calls like the soft skills, right? Dealing with clients, making sure you lay out like this is how we operate beforehand. You know what I mean? And I feel like I know like friends of mine, and they just get railroaded, or they let themselves get railroaded time and time again. They don't stand up for themselves. And I tell my friends sometimes, I'm like, listen, not only like when you don't have those soft skills to communicate to a client and lay things out, have a contract, have a statement of work, have a schedule. If you don't lay all that stuff out, you're just asking to get taken advantage of. And when you do that, not only are you hurting yourself, but then you're hurting every other artist that's going to come after you that is also going to work for the same client, because you're setting a bad precedent kind of thing. And so that's, I talk about this all the time, is that like when you're a freelancer, like, yeah, you're an artist, but you're also a business owner. And like, you're one of those people that like, my brain does not operate like yours, Bart, where it's like, that's why you can run your own thing. And like, I don't know the first thing about running a business or anything like that, but I know enough to like have a statement of work or something like that. And so would you say that that's like a big reason why like you can kind of insulate your team is just like, I'm sure you have a lot of repeat clients too, which, you do great work and they enjoy it and they know that you do things on time, you're responsible, blah, blah, blah. But like, do you find that's all just in communication skills and those soft skills that allow you to keep things pretty chill?
I think people are nervous to say no. They get stressed out and, they get pissed off when a client says, hey, can we do this? The client has no idea that what they just asked for was a big deal. They're not most of the time, they're not purposely being jerks. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, maybe they're just trying to see what they can get away with. Because they look good if they can get an extra deliverable for the same budget. But it's not necessarily like malicious, things like that. It's just kind of a game, and that's part of what their role is, to let me just ask for this one more thing.
Yeah.
And see if they go for it. And most of the time, it completely stresses us out as artists. But for them, it was just I'm just going to toss this request up in the air. And if they go for it, awesome. And if they push back, like I don't think they're going to like ream you. If they're going to ream you, you want to lose that client anyway. And so I think that a lot of it is the way you allow yourself to be treated. And people will treat you the way that you allow that. I think that obviously applies to everything from dating relationships to clients. There's a certain standard and maybe charisma or or something that you hold yourself to when you're dating. And it's no different with a client. As
I'm gonna
far
see
as
how
what
many free dinners I can get from this sucker. Yeah, I'm
like,
gonna get him
like
a
what you're
bottle of
gonna
wine. Yeah,
what you're gonna allow or what you're not gonna allow,
yeah, yeah. I think that's smart, and I think that's something where we talk about how a lot of people are afraid to put themselves out there in certain ways, and I think to have a studio, you have to have a certain amount of confidence in yourself that number one, you can do it, you can deliver. Number two, that however many employees you have, that you can keep them bread in their baskets and stuff like that. Hey everyone, quick break here. Listen, if you're digging all this motion design talk and thinking, hey, I want to get in on this, or man, I guess I really need to level up my skills, head on over to School of Motion, where we got an awesome curriculum that'll take you from zero to hero or help you push your skills to the next level if you're already in the game. Whether you're just figuring out keyframes or ready to dive into some seriously advanced stuff, we've got courses that'll get you there. Head on over to schoolofmotion.com to check out our full lineup of courses. Trust me, your future self will thank you for this one. Now back to the show. So we talked a lot about dealing with clients and stuff like that. I want to kind of switch gears to, I don't know how you are sensing the industry as a whole, or if you feel like you're kind of insulated, you're doing fine, but we can talk a little bit about that later. But like, I know there's a lot of artists out there that are like super struggling, or like, I feel like it's 50-50. I don't know. Like there's people doing fine, but I do hear a lot of stories about anxiety, and there's a lot of new people entering the industry too. And, there's a lot of anxiety there. Like, how do I break in? So as far as like what you look for at ABC, like what are the things that you're looking for when you are hiring a new artist? Like there's so many tools that are available today. Like, I feel like that I get questions all the time of like, what the hell should I learn? Like, what should I do?
In finding talent for ABC, obviously you got to have a good portfolio. And we have a separate email for careers specifically. It's careers@alreadybeenchewed.tv if anybody's
That
interested.
anyone could shoot their shot and cold email Bart at any time.
Absolutely, please do. And this is the other thing too. Like, don't be sensitive. I'm not going to be mad at you for hitting us up a million times with your portfolio, and don't be mad at me if we don't get a chance to respond to it. Because this is how hiring works at ABC, and I don't know if other studios do this, but I'll glance through those career emails every once in a while. But it's really when we're ready to hire that it's like, okay, now I'm going to actually go through these emails, and I'm going to actually like dig through the portfolios. And so I'm responding to people 6 months, a year later after they've applied. And so often we're trying to make relationships with them, whether it's meeting them at NAB, freelancing with them, because talent obviously has to be there. But for me, it's got to be how do I say it? Humble. Like, I want to work with artists that are humble, not egomaniacs. I don't need to be arguing with somebody over some revisions, whether those revisions are coming from me or coming from the client. Like, I try to, have the mindset of like, okay, this idea is terrible from the client, but we are going to be so good at what we do that we can take that terrible idea and find a way to make it cool.
Yeah.
And so that's how we try to approach it. It doesn't
Right.
always happen that way. Obviously, we feel like clients kind of butcher some projects here and there. But the goal is like to at least have that mentality of like, okay, this is not a good idea, but we did this, and this, and it ended up being a great idea. And obviously that just makes everybody happier. And so when you're in the thick of a deadline and it is tight and you're not trying to work till 2 a.m. To pull this off, it just helps to have some low key people that aren't going to be high strung, so that those deadlines aren't even more stressful, and so we don't have, that type of I guess, egotistical artist that thinks they're God's gift to motion graphics. You know?
Yeah.
I don't have anybody in mind, by the way, so I
I
really
was like,
don't.
Joe, are you talking about the same person? No.
No, those people, maybe those people don't exist, but and that's fine. But we definitely have not encountered them here at the studio, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that like I always enjoyed doing work for you back in the day. Was like I remember some of those projects, and it's like that's also creative direction and art direction too, where it's like this is a bad concept. Let's really spice this up. And I feel like that's another thing that like another soft skill where it's like you're working on with a client that like it's terrible, but you know, you could also like go back with a client like, hey, listen, we can do this, this, and this. Looks pretty awesome, right? And they're like, okay, yeah. Like, I feel like there's, you know, I don't know how if that's how it worked with you, but you know, where you'd kind of the client would come at you with one thing, and you're like, but how about this? This sucks slightly less. Can we do this and just see what happens? Like, I feel like a lot of people just like they get a crappy concept, and it's like, okay, I guess we're doing this,
Yeah,
and it sucks.
yeah, yeah. Always looking for opportunities to figure out a way to push ourselves on a project into a new direction that keeps it interesting and exciting.
Now, I'm sure, like, you know, you say that you get a lot of people send in reels and portfolios and stuff. Now, and that's one of the things that I feel like a lot of people struggle with is you have a lot of competition, right? If you're an artist, you're trying to submit a reel and stuff like that. Do you find like there's a common mistake that a lot of artists are doing when they are submitting? Is it being like too demanding, or is it being too sensitive about things? Is it sending reels that are 5 minutes long instead of 30 seconds? Like,
It's it's being. I know I'm opening myself up to spam here, but it's being too shy. So I've actually interviewed people that I thought were fantastic, and maybe it's not time to hire them right now, but maybe 6 months from now, or 1 or 2 years from now, it's going to be the right time to hire them. And those people just don't want to bother me with additional emails, and I legitimately forget who they are. Like I'm on a lot of different client calls with a lot of different names on video chats. I may have video chatted and interviewed somebody and was really impressed not only with um, you know, their people skills, but their art skills as well. I may have every intent of like, okay, I really want to work with that person in the future, but I'm not going to log this and save it anywhere. I'm going to wait for them to hit me up again, because then I kind of know like they actually want to be here, and so I kind of don't worry about it until I've heard from them 2 or 3 times.
I mean, yeah, opening yourself up to spam. But yeah, it's also like you studio heads, studio owners, companies, they get how many applications a day, right? I mean, people are trying to fill out like AI generated forms online, and it's also AI generated things that like just remove you from the running altogether. But yeah, when you can actually email an actual studio that, you know, it's getting looked at and stuff, I think that's important.
And timing's everything. So when applying for a job, sometimes it's just a matter of if there's a need or not a need. And so, that's the same with clients. We've emailed back and forth with clients. I'm not even joking, for 12 years and gotten no work from them. And then on the 12th year, they're like, hey, I got a project. I really need you. But I stayed in contact with them for 12 years. That's the only reason that on the 12th year, we landed a big project with them. And a lot of times it can be that way. It's like, okay, sure, you applied for a job 6 months ago, but we just put a job offer out this week. So now we're like looking to go through and I think a lot of people would be kind of shy. Well, I didn't hear from them 6 months ago, so I'm not going to apply now.
I think that's also a little bit of like your own thought distortions where you're just thinking the worst when it's like, no, you just
Yeah.
they're just way too busy. Like don't think that it's like anything against you or something like that. So I mentioned before about how and I'm looking at like your Twitter, your Instagram, all that stuff, and it's just like constant awesome work. And whoever's like in charge of social media on your team is like awesome. Like
My son Coben does all of our social
oh
media.
really? Oh man,
Yeah.
he's got some yeah, any companies out there need a social media manager, man. I love the
Nice.
little tags and like the chef's cut butchered on the cutting block. Like just the
Yeah.
little sayings for every post too. It's just like awesome. I love it.
Nice.
But I mean, obviously you guys take social media a lot, seriously. I'm not sure. Maybe talk a little bit about like how often clients come to you versus outreach. But and we talked about being too shy. Some people are way too shy. I know a lot of artists that like they're too afraid to post or they don't post. They're struggling with imposter syndrome, stuff like that. I mean, obviously for you, it pays to post stuff. Do you ever find artists or you reach out to artists by work that you see on like Instagram, LinkedIn, or like
Yeah, it's like the main way. No,
that's
like
the main way?
Instagram is my love language. Yeah.
Oh, for real? Okay.
Yeah. I follow, connect, and people that I'd like to hire at some point. Having chats and sliding into their DMs. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's good to know because, and I talked to, PJ Richardson at Laundry and he said the same thing where it's like Instagram's also his love language. I love that it's like the love language. It's like, it's so funny, but it's like, I don't know. It's just visually. Yeah. Like if you tune your feed, you get a lot of beautiful work that crops up. And yeah, I mean, it's a way more chill place to like chat with a fellow artist or someone who runs a studio, then like I don't know, LinkedIn just feels like you're at some like stuffy conference room or something. Like let me hand you my business card. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's great to know. Like any of our listeners here, like if you're not posting on LinkedIn, like or Instagram, I also hear LinkedIn's pretty good too, but like Instagram, I just feel like there's so many art directors and people who can hire you eventually, like on there looking and seeing stuff. So if you're not posting, be sure you're posting.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but coming from a skateboard background and culture, it's creating skateboard videos is part of the culture. You get at a certain level of skateboarding and you almost don't go out without filming.
Right.
Like you have to actually convince yourself to go skate and not film something. And so I think just having that culture ingrained in me when I was much younger and filming everything every time I go out and skateboard has translated maybe over to my art as well. If I create something, I'm posting it, and even over to like my personal like fitness journey. It was like, all right, well, I don't have any skateboard clips to film right now, so I'm going to film these fitness clips so I remember what to do.
Gonna do some push-ups and share it. Yeah. But I mean, cause that's one thing too, where it's like some people say, oh, I don't have enough work. Do you also enjoy, like one thing I personally enjoy is when people post awesome work, but then they also show like a little bit of a breakdown of like, there's some people that post on Behance and like they have awesome breakdowns. Do you find that valuable to like kind of see thought processes behind like, not just like, okay, that final piece of work's badass, but like, what was the story there?
Yeah, of course. We do this series called Behind the Sauce on our Instagram feed, and it's mainly just swiping to see clay renders, hardware previews, and things like that. And those go more viral than the spot themselves, and so it's nice because it does give a peek behind the curtain, even though it's not a tutorial. You start to see things, and the other thing that's nice about it too is potential clients, they honestly don't even know that what we're doing is CG. So much,
Yeah.
like we have to tell people, like obviously you see like some hovering liquid, you realize it's CG, but there's so many times that people don't realize like this is CG. It's not live action. And so that's part of the reason we do those as well.
So even those, like you say, they go more viral. I feel like if they go more viral, they get into more faces, and some of those faces might be faces that work at companies that want to hire you. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, in order for somebody to want to work with you, they have to know who you are.
right,
Right. It
right, yeah.
sounds so logical, but
Simple, yeah, simple things.
yeah.
And no one's going to find you if you never post anything. So, all right, so let's kind of wrap everything up here because you've been around for this 15-year anniversary. I mentioned, I asked you before, like, what do you how are things now versus like you started? It's like you seeing like some shakiness in the industry now with like like I said, there's so much anxiety, and I feel like with AI, and there's big companies like Facebook and like these tech companies are having these layoffs. Like, what are you seeing as far as like from your perch atop the ABC? Like, what's the landscape out there right now?
If only ABC stood for always be changing, because that's what's happening, right? Things are changing rapidly, but that's not new. So I'll give you an example. When I graduated college in 1998, I knew Adobe Photoshop version 2, and I knew Adobe Illustrator, and that's it. Uh, and I graduated, and everyone was telling me that print was dead and that my degree was irrelevant. And I was like, great. I
And that
guess
was
I
back
better,
then.
yeah, I guess I better learn something other than graphic design right now. And so then I learned, like I said earlier, web development and building websites. I then had to switch over and learn how to do After Effects, and then had to switch over and learn how to do 3D animation. So it's not much different now. Like, what is your Photoshop to your web development to your 3D animation in 2025? So if you're a young person, you're likely going to need to learn Unreal. You're also likely going to need to learn Houdini. You're likely also going to need to learn AI, and developing things. And so you are going to jump around. You're going to have to learn a variety of things. And even as a studio, it gets challenging and it gets exhausting, to be honest. And so in our downtime, we explore Unreal, we explore AI, and still looking for ways to implement that into why our clients would benefit from that if they would. So it is definitely something that you have to keep working on and keep exploring and kind of change with the times.
We actually just today put out a video with Winbush, just kind of talking about how all the areas that Unreal Engine's being used, and it's actually PJ Richardson again from Laundry. He said they had a gig for SoFi Stadium, these car renders, and they had like you mentioned how when you went to the Street League skateboarding event, like they had these big jumbotrons and stuff, and it's like it's a big canvas to fill, right? And they were saying how they wouldn't have been able to even do the job in the amount of time that they had if it wasn't for Unreal Engine, because of just the sheer size and the pixels that they needed to render. Are you seeing stuff like that where it's like you're seeing a lot of, like, are you seeing a lot of opportunities for you as a studio to be able to like pitch to a client like, hey, we can do that, or like the Sphere, like, hey, we could do that, it's a large canvas, like outside of traditional broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, we can do a lot of what I would. I'm impressed with what the team's been able to pull off inside of Unreal. Um, that being said, it's no longer real time once it's done. And so then the question is it worth the man hours to port everything over into Unreal? For us, it was like, okay, we're spending 4 and 5 days bringing things over from Cinema 4D, bringing things over from Houdini, just to be able to render it faster out of Unreal. And it was like, I could have a machine do that, or I could have 4 artists that are talented and don't want to be porting stuff over do that. And so it just didn't make sense. So we have not really implemented a lot of Unreal with client work yet, even though we kind of have it. We know what we can do with it. And there just hasn't been a demand for it. And some of our clients that we're kind of pushing for Unreal have since come back and they're like, yeah, we're not going to be using that in production. So we're like, oh, all right.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to, it's the right tool for the job, right? But it's nice to, be aware that that's there and that exists. And it's kind of the one thing I want to talk about too, is that like you guys do a lot of like simulation work and stuff like that. Is that out of sheer, like your team enjoys doing that stuff and it's dope and it helps with the storytelling and stuff like that? Or is it also like the clients just are asking for that type of thing and they see other things, or like, hey, can you do this? Or is it a little bit of both?
That's an interesting question. So we started probably 8 years ago, adding Houdini into our pipeline. And many people will know Mark Fancher from some of his tutorials. And so he was our first person that was in Houdini. And now, 8 years later, we're almost exclusively in Houdini. We are using Cinema 4D to a certain degree. Sometimes it's a matter of compiling things and exporting it for rendering out of Cinema 4D. But a lot of what we're doing is in Houdini. Almost all of our staff is Houdini at this point. I don't even think we have anybody that's like only Cinema 4D now. Everybody's into it to a certain level. And I think one of my goals in building a team in the first place was, okay, I've accomplished some things as a solo artist, but I feel like there's so much more that can be done with a team. And I grew up playing team sports. I love basketball. I understand that a team is always going to beat one person. You put LeBron James out on the court by himself against five other players, he is not going to accomplish what he's accomplished, with the team around him. And so once I was able to start building a team, even long before Fancher came on board, then it was like, okay, now what can we do? This person's good at this. This person's good at this. And I almost view myself similar to a basketball coach. Like, it's all about making the right decisions of like, this person is good at 3-pointers. So let's make sure that there's a 3-pointer that we call a play for in this project. This person's really good at catching lob dunks. So when I develop this creative brief, I need to make sure that we throw a lob to this person and they can do an alley-oop. And so all the creative briefs are very much developed with, I know this person's going to be able to pull this off. I know this person's going to be able to pull this off. And that might actually contribute to your earlier question, which is, I'm not out here just generating a bunch of ideas that I'm romantic about, and you all better figure out how to do this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know you got to do it, but do it.
Yeah, that's not happening. I'm truly going into a project and saying, okay, well, I know he's good at this. I know he's not great at this. So we're gonna avoid that for this project, and that's how we approach it a lot of times.
I love that. So it's very much like you're just tailoring everything to every single person involved, whether it's the client, making sure that whatever they need to show off is handled well, and then every single person in your team is happy and they're not stuck,
Yes,
kerning 3D text for 2 weeks straight or something.
Yeah, and some of that too is I need to know who's working on what and how busy they are, because the creative brief that I'm developing for this client might not have these people who are really good at water available. So I'm just going to avoid water altogether on this creative brief. And I'm used to doing that because I was a solo artist. So
sure,
I was working with boat brands and had no clue how to simulate water, for like 6 years. You were part of that.
Oh, I know. Yeah, we were
working on boat concepts that did not use water simulations. Imagine that.
They had it was a 3D model of an already simmed water splash that we didn't have to do a sim at all. And we just, I love that.
Yeah.
I love those days. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's for print. It doesn't have to move. That's the beauty of print, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so wrapping up here, 15 years of ABC. What are you excited about for the future of not only already been chewed, but kind of like the industry as a whole? Because, I always like to end these things on a positive note with some optimism. So what are you excited about for the future here?
Yeah, so I think that the good news is I hear the opposite of this quite often. So I say the good news is for us, the budgets are continuing to get larger, and the scope of the projects are continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And some of that is because the budgets are getting bigger for us, but some of that is because technology makes things easier, you know? And so some of that shift is it used to feel like you were moving mountains and doing something beyond impossible 5 to 10 years ago, that today is like that is so easy. Like back in the day, that took a month to do in physical renderer, and
Right.
now give me 3 days, and I could knock out that same project in 3 days. And so for us creatively, it's like, oh, now we can do this, we can add this, we can throw fire into this, we can throw water into this, we can throw weaving into this, like you name it. Let's just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so it is an exciting industry. Screens are going up everywhere. And so it doesn't matter if it's on your phone or if it's wrapping around the side of the building. The opportunities are still changing and changing in a good way, which keeps me super interested because I've been doing ABC for 15 years, but I had been working in graphics, for 15 years prior to that. And so, uh, you know, the fact that I'm still doing this is because I'm still super interested and excited about what the tools are allowing us to do. Things that we would avoid, like we were teasing about, avoiding water back in the day because you basically had to be Pixar in order to pull that off. And now for us, simulating water is like an explainer video. It's like, okay, cool, we can do that. Yeah, no problem. I'm exaggerating, but I think the constant changing of the technology can be a little bit burdensome to some people for obvious reasons, but it also can be incredibly exciting, especially if you're a young person, because you come into this and you can be on a level playing field, if not have an advantage, because you're not having to do a million layers of compositing in After Effects and thinking about all of the stupid passes that you're going to have to kick out if you're getting into what we do right now. All of the stuff that we used to have to do and the tricks we used to have to do to make it, look good back then, you don't have to do any of that stuff. So you can come in on a ground floor and you can really take advantage of the new modern tools and not even be influenced by all of the old tricks and hacks that you used to have to do. So as a young person, that's super exciting. As an old dog, it becomes a little bit overbearing. It's like, I got to learn Unreal now. I got to learn Houdini now, like things like that. And so uh, with all of those changes, I think it's just a matter of perspective and kind of where you are in your career. But it's not new and it's not different. Like I said, when I was coming up and had to change what I was doing from print to motion graphics, I went out to Los Angeles and I took a class on Final Cut Pro so that I could learn more about editing. And in my class, I'll never forget this. I was sitting with people, this was in Hollywood, but I'm sitting with people who were editors for movies, famous TV shows. And I'm in the same class with them learning Final Cut Pro because they were used to linear editing and they didn't know how to edit on a computer. And it was just wild that here I was self taught in iMovie trying to learn Final Cut Pro. And so, the same thing's happening now in 2020. that's a good thing. It's opportunity for people to jump in on new technology and know the technology better than anybody else.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing to end with, is that as technology is changing, everything's getting easier, and it's allowing us to do more of what we enjoy doing, right? Where you're thinking less about, okay, I have this badass artistic concept or creative concept, and I have to spend less time on how do I do this though, and spend more time of like, how far can we push this creative and how good can we make this look, and just spend more time being an artist than a technician. So I think that's a great thing to kind of end with. And I don't know if you had anything else to add about that little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, are you looking at the glass half empty or half full? I guess it probably depends on where you are in your career.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine you're thinking things are half full and maybe even overflowing here after, you got your 15-year anniversary going on here. But I just want to thank you so much for taking time out. It's always great to catch up with you. And again, congratulations on 15 years. It's such a compliment. And I can't wait to come see you in Dallas here in a few weeks, man.
Yeah, man, really exciting. We have over 180 people, 170-ish people that are signed up and coming. A lot of familiar names and faces are going to be there, so it should be a good time.
Yeah, it'll be a good reunion. Well, Bart, thank you so much for not only, having time, but all the stuff that you do. I always knew you've been so generous with your time and teaching people. And I know you even have like interns at your own studio too. So if you're an intern, you're that age, like definitely look into Already Been Chewed. But thank you again so much, Bart, and congratulations again.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right, folks, as a wrap on my chat with Barton Damer, man, what a journey it's been for him, from grinding it out as a freelancer to running Already Been Chewed studios for 15 years. It's pretty wild. We covered everything from taking your shots to be able to land those dream clients to building killer portfolios and all the ups and downs along the way. Big thanks for Barton for dropping all the serious knowledge bombs about our industry. And whether you're just starting out or you've been in the game for a while, I think there's a lot of little gold nuggets in there for you. And hey, with budgets apparently going up and tech evolving like crazy, I'd say it's a pretty exciting time to be a motion designer. Now, if you've enjoyed our chat, be sure to subscribe and leave us a nice review. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, keep on creating. Bye, everybody.